Now, court has adjourned in the matter involving the DA and the ANC. This revolves around the ANC's controversial cadre deployment policy. It took center stage in the High Court in Pretoria, Tshwane, today. The Democratic Alliance wants the policy to be declared unconstitutional and unlawful. The main opposition has accused the ANC of illegally interfering in appointments to ensure members are appointed based on loyalty to the ANC rather than their merit and skills. The DA says this is the single most important court case for rebuilding state capacity following the near collapse of several state-owned entities, including Eskom. Now, the power utility, Transnet and SARS were identified by the Zondo Commission as being hollowed out by state capture during Jacob Zuma's presidency. Pule Letshwiti-Jones is following this story for us, joining us now live from inside the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. Pule, good afternoon. Just take us through what happened in court today.
Good afternoon, Britain, and definitely some of the important submissions made by the Democratic Alliance, with them having said or highlighted 3 points, in which one, they said cadre deployment was unlawful, 2, it was inconsistent within accordance to the constitution, and 3, it does not aim to actually, seek or go for the route of transparency and holding, executives accountable. But also, this comes in the back of that Zondo Commission report, which of course indeed had said that the cadre deployment policy in itself was unlawful, and spoke, volumes around that policy, which was of course currently being implemented by the African National Congress, who today, of course, facing it off with the DA in court regarding whether the courts should declare the policy in its entirety as unlawful. Joining me right now is Leon Schreiber, who from the DA, Member of Parliament. Thank you for speaking to us. Shooting straight into it, one of the arguments brought by the ANC is that it's accusing you of trying to censor the organization and infringing on their freedom of speech with respect to their political choices. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I found it to be quite an interesting argument because, of course, we know that all of the activities of the Cadre Deployment Committee currently and for all the years that it has existed has been done in secret. So the idea that somehow cadre deployment is an exercise in free speech and public debate just doesn't make sense given all the secrecy that's always surrounded it. In fact, it wasn't until last year that we managed to expose those minutes from the National Cadre Deployment Committee that for the very first time we actually saw anything about how it operated. So I think that that argument has fairly short legs, and of course there's a world of difference between making a public statement and exercising your freedom of speech and having a secret meeting where you instruct a minister who to appoint and then say, if you don't appoint this person, you're going to be disciplined. So that is, of course, what the case is actually about, and I think that was a bit of a distraction that we heard. And, of course, it raises the other interesting question, which is that the Zondo Commission finding that you referenced, whether they would regard that also as somehow censoring them. So I don't think that that one's going to go too far.
What do you take of the fact that they say the policy aims to recommend and not necessarily dictate, like one of the legal counsel had said, who are representing you guys today?
I think there's a lot of evidence that is going to cause a problem for the ANC on that account, because some of the arguments, some of the evidence we heard were actually directly from the ANC's own affidavits, where they said that if a member of the ANC who serves in government actually disregards the recommendation from the deployment committee, that person could be subject to discipline, I suppose could theoretically be recalled from their position for not adhering to party discipline. I think for any normal person, the idea that you can be punished if you don't do what I want is something far more than a recommendation. So I think that too is something that we will deal with again tomorrow. But certainly a lot of evidence from the Zondo Commission, from the cadre deployment minutes, and indeed from the ANC's own affidavits, that it goes far beyond some kind of innocent recommendation.
What now? I mean, for what you say would be a much more constitutionally applicable way of circumventing government recruitment processes?
Well, I mean, the irony of all of this is that there are legally defined processes for making appointments. If you go and look at the Public Service Act and other spheres of government, it would involve constituting a selection panel of experts, perhaps also having the minister of that relevant department on the selection panel, allowing anyone to apply, going through the interview process, and ultimately having the selection panel recommend the appropriate candidate. So actually, in a very real sense, what we are trying to achieve is to enforce what the law says we should be doing, which is to have an open and transparent and fair process where we hopefully end up with having the best candidates selected on the basis of their ability to do the job. The problem with cadre deployment, in our view, is that it in fact circumvents that entire legal process by creating this kind of parallel appointing system with these secret meetings giving instructions on who should be appointed. So if we are successful here, for the very first time we'll have a situation in South Africa where we can start enforcing government and the current governing party to actually follow what the law says about appointment processes.
So, in essence, are you trying to declare the policy in its entirety as unlawful, or the human conduct which have been alleged by some of the ANC members as well?
Yes, our problem is with the policy because of the way in which the policy creates the conduct and the problem that we end up dealing with. And of course, the stage 6 load shedding that we're dealing with is a very clear example in our view of what happens when state institutions are hollowed out and when you have the kind of corruption and mismanagement that we've seen. And we believe that some of that is indeed linked to the policy of cadre deployment. So at the end of the day, that is what we are trying to address. We believe that the deployment policy, both as it is written and in terms of the evidence that we've submitted before the court, makes it clear that it actually violates a range of constitutional provisions. Perhaps most clearly Section 1973, which says that no person who's working for the state can be discriminated against on the basis of political considerations. And I think it's quite clear that that's what the deployment policy does.
Mr. Schreiber, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Or pretend this DA Member of Parliament, Leon Schreiber, joining us this afternoon.